Well, it's too late, baby, now it's too late. They already know you're a traitor. You need to resign before you run out of time, or you could be drawn and quartered. Why do I keep screwing that up? I keep doing scene 4 first, when obviously scene 1 is first. 1 is before first. 4 and 1.
The way you treated me too many times before. Don't you know you love them, baby, too? Oh, you know I want you there, I wanna be right there with you. I know I gotta keep you by my side today I die. 'Cause baby, ecstasy is in my hand. Oh, when I'm holding yours in mine and walking in the sand. Oh, baby, you know it's fine. But now you done and piss me off. You ain't done something you shouldn't have done. Baby, I'm mad. I'm going on. Oh, I'm going on.
And let's see if we can't maybe entice a few people more to join us here for this lovely occasion. 1 second, please. It's a new window where I get to see all of my new friends. Alright. Yeah, it would be nice. Doing my tweedling. Twaddling. Twiddling. Well, not seeing any opportunistic sharing points, really. Let me see if this link will actually work. So, I was going to upload this, but since I can just put it right here, take a look at this. The only other application that you can share with, besides things that are in English, and many of them also owned by Russian investors, is a Russian version of Facebook right there. That's like no Spanish, no Chinese, Russian.
What's that one all the way on the end? Yeah.
Stumble upon. Yeah, that's an old fucking spyware thing. I can't believe they even have that on there. Anyways. Yeah, Facebook, Russian. Twitter, Russian. Google Plus, Russian. Blogger, I don't know, probably Russian. Reddit, so Russian. Tumblr, might as fucking well be Russian. Pinterest, no idea. Russian. LinkedIn. Was very shadily and shoddily invested, but now that it's not popular anymore, it's no longer Russian. It's mostly Microsoft.
Actually, it's still pretty popular for job
Yeah,
stuff.
for what it do. So anyways, twinkling. Twinkle, 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 twinkle. Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, how I wonder what you're at. Up above the world so high, like a tweet in the sky. Okay, anyways. I just commented. And these people... no, let me get to that in a second. I just commented on these people a little while ago. They were sharing a story just to call the person a moron. I wish people would share my stories just to call me a moron. Fuck.
You want that? I should reactivate my Twitter account and share your videos and call you a moron?
No, but if you got on Facebook and put the shit in all the groups and stuff every time, that'd be nice. Don't need to blow up your phone any more than it already is. I just commented. I have basically a strategy to reunite divided America. I have the truth that frees humanity from enslavement in cyclical generations that everybody seems to have forgotten. But, you know, I know because I was there. I have a historical context, not only that brings the Bible into perspective historically, but also makes clear the exact reason why history has been limited from, you know, popular thought, basically. So, looks like we got a couple people who've joined us. Welcome, welcome. Going to try to keep the scroll up before I begin. I'm going to go ahead and answer the question here. No. The internet was initially an intergovernmental project that the CIA had theorized could be used to spread democracy. Okay? And for that reason, before the internet even came into being, which was done under an intergovernmental council that Al Gore had established in 1992, really, technically, like the web as we know it. But before that, it was just a way for government agencies to communicate to each other by a secured network. Then they had opened it up to a library access and an educational type thing. Okay, and that's what paved the way for the international communication lines to be laid, which would then be opened up in the early 90s to become the internet. So initially it was for colleges and governments and power companies and, you know, infrastructure critical organizations who had networks locally already that needed to connect them overseas and you know, before this point there were direct infrared beamings and you know, like cloud-bounced satellite dishes, basically. But the Kremlin, as of '87, had issued a memorandum saying that not only was the internet a threat, but it was an opportunity, and that the Americans did not know what they had built. And it turns out they were right. So anyways, for any new viewers, I don't have a third wall, I have fish tanks. And you're welcome to see what I'm staring at on my other videos, in which I basically put up the fish tank so y'all can see. In fact, I might go ahead and plug in the camera and just kind of make the fish tank go in the background again. Because this could be a long discussion. I hope people had the patience to tolerate my slow pace last night. Excuse me.
I see. I think I just shared.
Apparently I'm fighting off allergies. Well, last night first part of this, which I should probably go ahead and predicate with a time frame, so I can get around to editing the video title. Wound up discussing what I could remember, and in some ways more than I could usually remember, thanks to the recent discovery of something that I had previously remembered, and bringing that into context and realizing that it actually was where I said it was kind of gave me the whole story of pre-flood and post-flood settlement. I'd be interested if Mr. Conway was aware of any stories that Noah actually settled in Ireland. Or how many generations it took them to get there. Then again, it was probably just Noah's luck that he would lead his people there just in time to become too weak and crippled to lead them anymore and have to resign. But anyways. So we talked about the time before the flood. We talked a little bit about the time before time and the philosophical construct, the democratic manifestation of reality that became time and reality as we know it today, and as well as a Star Trek enthusiast perspective on how God works in line with creation from the sense of man's eventual fate, which should be timelessness. See, a Trekkie's ultimate goal or whatever, the ultimate state of a being is like Q. Okay, a being that can exist without space and time, a being of pure energy. And I talked about on that last video how the ultimate fate of those beings would be to create a world based on a certain set of principles, and I laid out how those principles tied into early perspectives on reality and ancient mystic perspectives on creation and stuff like that, that completely account for perceptions within the scientific community, as well as providing the necessary unaccounted for variables to explain things that are largely being taken at face value. But anyways, please find the patience, find the time to go watch that never-ending fucking overly paused video, because at least while I'm taking my time trying to figure out what the hell to say next, and having the deep thoughts and memories required to do so, I was providing a pretty good slideshow of maps. But I don't want people to take my lessons as any sort of complete guide to history. They're really meant to be complementary to people who know both history and biblical history, or at least the basics of both history and biblical history. So, it's worthwhile to either learn that first or learn this first, but learn both. And, you know, my advice to anyone is take anything that anybody says with a grain of salt. And I welcome people to take anything that I say with a grain of salt, because if I fuck up, I want people to notice and correct me if I contradict something, or I might have spoken in error.
And to do it politely is called constructive criticism.
Oh, what a concept here.
Right? Who'd have fucking thunk it?
But there's things that mankind knows that I might be missing that I'd like to know. Anyway, going to wait for my thinking stick to arrive. Oh,
As if by magic. Because I'm a lady merc.
So let's see here. Let me get my folder
I can't.
of the map collect. Settle down.
At
Settle.
least I'm laughing about it.
We were talking about the time from creation until the post-flood time. And after the flood, there was several generations which people are quite familiar with. And then a root of British history that people often mock. And that is the settlement of the Triple Tribe, first in the land of Thrace. And in fact, this map out of context is actually still a good map to show, because over there, right above where it says Armenia, if you painted like a little, if you made the A of the Armenia into like one of my little Paragon houses, like that little dot up there that kind of would make the center of the roof. Right about there somewhere is Ararat, if I'm not mistaken, where the Ark landed. Allegedly, supposedly, whatever you want to think. But what I illustrated last night was that there is clear contextual history that supports the Ark having landed there. And not only the settlement of mankind from there, but the politics and the history of warfare and of deleted history and secret warfare both coincide with that being the location from which man dispersed post-flood. But what we talk about here usually is Western civilization. Now, I went into the origins of the African and Asian people last night, and we stopped short of getting through the 1st century BC, so I thought I might recap just the 1,000 years leading up to that point. What's up, Joey? Now, what you have here is a time illustrated after the Hittites, after the first rise of the Meso-Persians or Parthians. And this area actually should, in my opinion, be a bit more extensive than this, but actually reflects the results of extremely destructive conquest. Neville, g'day, mate. Neville should see the last hour for sure of the video last night, where I discussed the origins of the Maori people. And oh, what a story that is. And why they're not blacker than the blacks who they progenate. So anyways, trying to sift through crap in my head and not double up too much on what I spoke about last night, but it is a pretty valuable context to get started with. So here's the deal. What we covered yesterday was that the seeding of the first empire of conflict actually came to the Middle East, to Anatolia, from across the Black Sea. And then I laid out how this mystery land, this land that doesn't like to be mentioned in history books altogether, is tied to the foundations of both pseudo-Greek history, actually Phoenician history, and Russian history. Because by the evidence, though it is limited and in some cases outright fake, you still have the existence of Scythians, Proto-Scythians, Ugrian, and the so-called Volga battle axe culture, which, during the time of Alexander, used an eerily familiar divide and conquer tactic to cause the results of a chauvinist revolution in Greece to basically subdue all of the would-be allies of the Magdalenians, or Celtics, or Ebrians, or Hebrews, that weren't of the tribe of Judah. And that is Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh. And the land that the Scythians, is the most appropriate word, I suppose, Tartesians, I would have called them in my last lifetime, the people that they wanted out of their way, the people they wanted gone, the land that they wanted to take at that point, is the former land of Thrace, as you can see, not mentioned on this map, because it was destroyed in this period, later to become the land of Yugoslavia, Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria. And in fact, it was during this time that Bulgaria occupied this land. And Bulgaria, in this context, was simply represented of the Scythians and Volga battle axe culture. Now again, this is the same empire that seated Hatti as the first Hittite emperor when he conquered the Hotland people, which calls his name into question whether or not it was a real name or whether he just adapted it. Because what they did is they conquered these people and adapted their culture so that no one would suspect that they represented a empire of conquest that could be otherwise accessed, and so that their level of resources that they could bring to bear in conquering were just unforeseeable. And then this same area where the question mark is right there, that is possibly where this Hittite empire first emerged. And, you know, up until this point there had been some small wars, but the Hittites were the first real conquering empire, and theorized to be tied with the Phoenicians. They expanded well beyond the lines of this particular map here, but that's only, theorized possible. But if you look at this, what you see is that basically the whole story of Alexander is bullshit. And what I mean by that is that if Alexander controlled all of the Greeks, or if he was somehow his own master and not simply someone allowed to conquer with the use of another nation's soldiers, then why don't they mention the fact that at this time there were Greek city-states all about the Crimea? Now, by my memory, that is Tartarus. That is hell on earth. That was a place where people were treated like products. And there were what I could only describe as ogre-like men in possession of us. And you find their remnants in even the Greeks and Armenians today. Now, what do Greece and Armenia have in common? They are two prongs of a pincer movement aimed at destroying the center of the old world government in Palestine. And I talked about before this, and up until about this point, Europe was a completely different place that was more socially advanced than we are today, while being far less technologically advanced. And in many ways, a far more efficient society. Certainly less illness, certainly less suffering, and certainly much longer lifespans. And the whole reason why the King of the North lent Alexander his armies to go conquering and to conquer was to get rid of this thorn in their side. See, the children settled in Thrace initially, which should actually include a larger tract of land than is here mentioned. If you see Daco Thracians, I'm not sure what Daco refers to. But that whole area with the backwards S, the field of rivers that is essentially carved out like a yin-yang onto the earth, that is the sacred cradle of civilization. Completely forgotten. And that is where the descendants of Noah were to be left behind to protect the children that would proceed further and settle in northern, central, and southern Europe. And it was a benefit of nobility or accomplishment or extreme, I don't know, piety, maybe, that one would be chosen to go to the far lands, now known as England, Ireland, and Scotland. And, don't forget Wales. So, giving an unplanned lecture is always fun, isn't it? You can see quite simply on this map where the yin-yang is and how they just basically colored it in on the mountain border. But what that represents is a furtherance of conquest of the sons of Cain from their initial location, which was a plateau deep in Mongolia 1,000 years before this. Now, this here, when put in context with the Greek colonies, city-states that were essentially, just they forgot to tell us about them or something, not mentioned much, not talked about a whole lot, that kind of thing. this all ties into the exact political landscape that led up to the time of Christ, and even to the downfall of Caesar himself. Caesar died for the same reason that Christ did, politically. Understanding that is the key to understanding the entire history of the world. Every single prophet, the entire Old and New Testament, all makes more sense if you understand that. Which is why it's so fucking hard to understand, and why modern pseudo-education has been geared around keeping people from understanding it. Now you see, Caesar was a Gaul who fought in a civil war in Gaul. When Gaul had been politicized by the Horde after many years of war with the completely Horde-turned Germanics, not to be confused with the Bavarians who would later build Berlin and become the modern Germans, not anymore, but were. But the entire idea behind Caesar's rise to power was he was a general who was adopted by nobility in this green area right here in the south of France. He was not from Rome. He was from Gaul. And there were noble areas that were considered to be proper places of Rome that senators could be elected from, and there was, after this point, a bit of a wilderness type feel, because after the time of Alexander, the Vikings, which were basically Norse tribes turned Horde through political propaganda and economic suppression. And the entire North and Britain were cut off from Magdalena. That's when it actually became centered around the south of France and eventually Rome itself. And as you can see, it is this conquest into Thrace, seen on this map as Dacia, Greater Thrace, I would call it. What is that labeled a purple as? I can't see it. Hold on, let me get that map and see if I can read the bottom. Regini clienti di Roma con Ottaviano. autonomous. So Thrace at that time, or for most of its time during the Roman Empire, was, as I've mentioned previously, a place where Roman imperial, not Roman city, Roman imperial statesmen and generals and other officers who had earned their way into a noble-like status were allowed to settle. And this agrarian expansion into the lands north of Crimea allowed them to basically be like the first American border. Okay, picture the first American border, all right? And that's Texas down there. Okay? That's where the tough fucking farmers live. And you want them tough fucking farmers there for a reason. Because I don't know if y'all know this, but Mexico almost kicked our ass once. You know, we're all proud, dumbass Americans, but we don't realize we had a very, very serious war with Mexico not but 150 fucking years ago. A little more. Not that long ago. Well, what's up, Mr. Conway? So Texas and Thrace are a lot in the same respects as far as their relative cultural aspect of the time, and there were these people called the Jews who had been taken into captivity. Now, the idea that they were taken into captivity in Babylon is correct. What is not correct is what is considered to be the modern location of Babylon. Now, just to backtrack a little bit, Babylon is nowhere on this map. Okay? Babylon, in my opinion, isn't even in the Middle East. And in fact, if you want to have a original place that had enough heliocentrism, that had enough slavery, intercultural communication, that took on enough prisoners to be that Babylon mentioned in the Bible, you're looking at Greek Crimea. Now, in the time that the Jews had been taken into captivity, Babylon was considered to be those north parts. From the Middle East. But what seems to be deleted from history over and over again, including the mystery of the Phoenicians, is where those people raided and took their captives. Tartarus. Hell on earth. And now, while there may have been a Babylonian city known as the Mercy Seat, which is a term that had a profound influence on the Judean culture that escaped from there. The diaspora, or the exit from Babylon, came in the form of people of the tribe of Judah, who were Shemites, settling in a land that was later to be conquered by the Horde. Kind of like, picture the Horde as like the communist guerrillas and the Colombian drug lords, and the people that are willing to pretend they're living alongside you peacefully, but they're not. And the tribe of Judah at this point began to be the foundational building block of what is now known as the Slavic people. A blending of the tribes of Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh, and Judah. Hebrews, all. Children of God, all. Turned against each other, one by one, through lies and deception, from the Horde. Deep shit, huh? Now, it was also at this time that certain people came into Rome and into Palestine and into Greece. Very wealthy, very powerful, influential people. Made almost overnight, it seemed. All they had to do was buy property and show up. And from Phoenicians to Philistines to Pharisees, they called themselves. Interesting. And they came with those who had come directly from Babylon and said, "We are Jews, we belong here." But like those that came from Babylon, and somehow allowed to show up with money and wealth and all this new knowledge that they claimed the Hebrew had lost. Those were the Sadducees, by the way. They did a lot of things that didn't seem like they really understood the words that they had written down on paper. And in fact, it became a subject of much political strife that they had written the words down on paper. But the real Jews, the real tribe of Judah, of the many tribes that were taken and escaped in different directions, they were kept for their skills. They were enslaved, reinculturated, even renamed for their occupations, which should sound familiar to any modern member of the Ashkenaz or pre-Ashkenaz diaspora, because there are a lot of names that are occupation-oriented. And this goes from this time of enslavement. And these people had escaped, kind of like Mexicans across the Texas border, into the land of Thrace, now known as Poland. And were pursued by Scythians, or what's seen up there as Sarmatians. And this exodus of their, fine captured artisans that they did so much to try to enslave and try to convince that they had fine family traditions of doing these things that were required of them. They came into Europe and were welcomed there for quite some time. And as these political waves of Cossack-like Germanics and Scythians and like Viking-like barbarian fucking people, it wouldn't just be in the form of simple raids. It would be in the form of bought-out politicians and artists and authors, and even the occasional kidnapping of a town crier's spouse just to get him to spread lies. I mean, there was a lot of ruthless shit going on back then that became geared towards this thing that is now known quite well as anti-Semitism in Europe. This is a problem that predates even Christ. And it is the cause for which Caesar was killed. And like I said, one of the political reasons for which Christ was killed. And John the Baptist, for that matter. Now, let's move on to, what do we have here? Not that. Remove. Don't, well, yeah, whatever. that. This one's still going to be interesting and useful. And we need to add this one, and this one. Okay. So here is a political map representing that area of Gaul that was in rebellion, that then had to be conquered, a new treaty established. And it represents the other new treaties that had to be formed to end the Roman Civil War. But what you might notice is that unlike Magdalenia and unlike the later expanse of Rome, Rome had nothing to do at this point with Thrace and Constantinople. They had been denied that center of the world. The very idea that Rome was somehow in control of something that could be defined as the world is complete nonsense. And any Roman text in which they refer to themselves as considering themselves masters of the entire world should be taken as complete nonsense, and nothing it says should be taken as true. Now, this map is kind of a little too zoomed out, but what's interesting to me is that in all these maps, in all these old maps of historical periods that you get taught in school books and that you can read when you Google something online, they will name Arabia, Parthia, Libya, sometimes even Nubia, and they might name Bulgaria. They might name one little group of tribes up to the north. But they almost exclusively leave that area blank. Just blank, as if nothing ever happened in Crimea. As if Crimea was not somehow a crucial component in ancient civilization and politics. We cover that in another video. Let me focus here. So, the Jews came before the time of Caesar, but then the false Jews came during the time of Caesar and bought themselves a kingship in Palestine. You might have been familiar with this king. His name was Herod. And I believe his life has been divided up into a couple of different Herods, but I'm pretty sure it was all one Herod. different careers. Because he was not a real king. He was a bought king. And the payment that humiliated Caesar, that was taken by Mark Antony, wasn't taken for corrupt reasons. It was taken because they falsified evidence of their inheritance and had paid witnesses and everything to account. And when Caesar died, there was a far-removed kingdom in the east, named for the sons of Noah of the tribe of Ham. Began as the Han dynasty, covered in the previous video. Which later, as the daughters of the Muses were also pushed by the Persians to the east, became interestingly known as the Song dynasty. And I would love to try to learn enough about their ancient stories to try to make sense of them in this context. But alas, I do not have those answers at the moment. It just occurred to me to look into it more, in fact. But this Persiatic, Asian unity of households that would eventually become what is now known as China, they had a lot of political conflict and a lot of feudal type claims and counterclaims coming from royalty that people knew were tied to the Mongolians and Manchurians. And, you know, that a lot of people felt like, we didn't build the fucking wall for nothing, man. They did that to keep those people out. But let's see. Oh, there we go. There's right there. Well, on the one side of the world, you had this battle for inheritance of basically who was son of God enough to rule Rome. And bear in mind, you know, Caesar was a son of Jupiter, supposedly, right? In the Far East, there was a growing civilization of tribes that had fled into that wilderness, essentially. And unlike any conquering army stupid enough to cross the Ganges into the Mauryan Empire at the time, they found their way safely through the passes of the mountains. And this represented, because this was their land now, this was unoccupied land altogether, this was now their land. And they were at, before the time of the Persians and Alexander, unity with this land of Magdalidia. There was a possibility for succession that could unite the entire world. Now, Africa at this point was also unsettled. Mankind did not come from Africa. Black people do not come from Africa. Black people come from Mauria. And quite frankly, to say that they evolved from Africa is insulting compared to the ancient royal, world-recognized, sacred people that were descendant of Gabriel himself. And the reason why Africans look more black than the only people left with their namesake, and why the people in this area don't look as black anymore, is because of easily traceable infiltration. Whereas the Maurians who came to live in Africa found themselves in complete isolation, the Maurians who lived here did not. Neither did the Maoris of New Zealand, which basically looked like a cross between Pacific Islanders and Africans. The Hindu peoples, or the current Indian people, were originally as black as Africans. You have Khazarian, Aryan, Asian, Persian, Semitic, Pacific Island, basically every sort of tribe mixing into this area all at once at a very slow rate over time, but a very consistent rate over time, because of two things: the isolation, the geographic isolation of this area, and its lack of booming time periods. Like there's no real, well, this 100 years these people had a great empire and everybody was trading with them and shit like that, and that significantly altered their genetics all at once. Now, this happened more gradually over time, but still, because of the vast size of the area, and because one could essentially find themselves trapped there, when trying to travel from east to west, or from Media to Far East. Their genetics are what they are today. Anyway. Now, let's see, what's the difference in time frames we have here? We have about 1,000 years ago, and then we have about 2,000 years ago. But I want to show the Roman Civil War so you can see how the northern tribes, when their little takeover of the false Jews didn't work out so well, and a civil war was caused because of it. The locations of support and opposition are quite telling and tie directly back to two things. First, what we've been talking about, the areas that were populated from here and influenced from here, Greece and Armenia, or pseudo-Greece, post-feminist Greece. They took a bunch of stuff that women figured out and called it their own culture. Made up a bunch of men's names. And then renamed some of the fucking people in some really nice old paintings of me. Anyways.
I swear I thought you just said panties.
No, I don't have any. I don't wear panties here. Well, unless you count on my head from time to time. So, keep the target area in mind. Keep North in mind. Keep Russia in mind. Keep the future Golden Horde area in mind when you consider not just where the political strife came into play, as in the senatorial noblemen being kind of convinced of some sort of socialistic-like populism that they could use to their own advantage, but also that they were made to distrust in some legitimate ways, but made to distrust the Thracians, the freaking building blocks of Rome, the retirees and their families, the Texas of Rome. So the Phoenicians that had come to politically rule south of Greece, and the Khazarian-esque colonies that had basically stemmed from the Babylonians, allied with the Thracians and with this concerted attempt at royal usurpation in Palestine and Egypt, which was until this point considered to be kind of the same place. There was Egypt, and then, north of there is Canaan. Until you got to Canaan, you were still in Egypt. And that's right in the middle of fucking Palestine. But now, even after this ended, and a new wave of civilization blossomed, let's see if we go to just 100 years after Christ again. You see an expansion back into the Germanic areas, where actually some very fine castles in the mountains had been holding out for quite some time while they were surrounded by barbarians. And a re-expansion into the fertile lands of Thrace, now Yugoslavia. But then still, in the north, where it says Sarmatia, because of this political strife that continued, the Thracians found themselves largely abandoned by the nobility of Rome. And this was the worst mistake the nobility of Rome ever fucking made. And these people that we've been told are uncivilized barbarians, despite the fact that they had the, foundation of Greece under their fucking control, of modern Greece, not of ancient Greece, and have us under enough control to forget that there was a feminine ancient Greece. They are these nameless, historyless people that you're told were just an unorganized band of whatevers that got lucky. No. They outsmarted Rome in every fucking way. And they slaughtered the Thracians, burned all traces of their civilization, and established the Bulgar Khanate. Serbia, the Serbian people, that is the Thracians that had mixed with the actual diaspora, they were confined to places they no longer even occupy. To some valleys south of Montenegro in Greece. And then many of them went to what is now, or what was Czechoslovakia, and to Germany, and to Spain. And in Spain, they have the remnant of their settlement that is targeted ever since I mentioned them for Russian-backed separatism. The Basque. Targeted ever since I mentioned them. Imagine that, because me on this little fucking YouTube channel with 4 viewers watching right now mentioned them as being connected. In fact, they're not the only place that was targeted. Because I mentioned them, think about the Mandians. Think about all the places that I've basically pointed to. And how they are central to the current conflict of today. Fucking blows my mind. I don't know about y'all. So here in this time frame, we're back at the advent of modern bullshit. This is actually the time of the Anunnaki. This is actually the time of the misshapen skulled army that came and tried to enslave mankind. Written off by historians who coincidentally came here to escape communism and shit as the vulgar ogre people or whatever. But then found by European digs just in the past century to have these elongated, deformed skulls that were wrapped and misshapen intentionally from birth and stuff like that. And so I need more coffee. My lovely wife is going to make some for us. So, does everybody feel their brain growing in unusual ways? Oh, I can feel it. I can feel it pulsating against my skull. I'm fine. I'm fine. Just a little Tourette's. Kitten, what you doing? Say hello, kitten. Hello, kitten. She's like, I'm ready to roll, motherfucker. Let go of me. Yep, a lot to take in. And I'm trying not to get myself off into too many specific tangents so you can just kind of keep pushing forward, you know? But now we come into the Dark Ages, a time that we know but we don't know. And in fact, we know more about what happened far away than we know what happened nearby. And now we get to the touchy subject. Islam. See, when the Parthians and the Greeks and the Persians and all these different people continued to push the children of God who had settled in Lower Persia, or let me see, this'll do. So if you look on the at the Gulf, the Persian Gulf, yeah, the Persian Gulf. That crescent-shaped and this is already alluding just by describing it, that crescent-shaped ledge between the mountains and the sea, or the Gulf, the Persian Gulf. That is where not the sons of Noah, not anybody written in the Bible, I don't think, settled. And if you could picture a people that were like the elves of Rivendell, and a female-dominated culture, that's where it was. Now, if you take the natural route in the face of these conquests, okay, first the Persian, and then Alexander's, there is Maurya, or Moria, and, well, you know, that wasn't really a place where people went. Because, like I said, if somehow you were deemed worthy to pass by the people there, you would not survive the wildlife. No, son. And if you look to the north of that, you have what is now called the Tibetan peoples. No, nobody fucking lived there. It was just inhospitable. It went from ice to tundra to desert. But there are a few passes that go from water to water, in which you can travel from that area straight down to Southeast Asia. If I can get a fucking map again. All right. Oh no, it's the one right underneath this one. Oh no, it's not underneath it anymore. Well, good thing I pulled it up. Now this area, this now far east, the east, the place where the wise men were now, had ancient commonality with the very founding demigods of Rome. Let's get rid of that one for now. And there was the sons of Noah, or the tribes of Israel, the Hebrews, Benjamin, Ephraim, Manasseh, and Judah, all occupying this land called Europe, and their elders were the founders of Rome. I mean, that's why they had that spiritual legacy and spiritual conflict. And it was known at the time, if a princess, a Persian princess, as a matter of view, from the Far East, or a king from the Far East, could marry someone of that lineage from the West, they would fulfill the prophecy. And become king and queen of the known world. And that true Hebrew prophecy almost came true back then. In fact, in some ways it did. But it had to be stopped. And it was stopped, even though it eventually did. You see, the greatest of the Pharisees, who may have been related in some way to Herod himself, sought to surpass even Herod, and some thought controlled Herod. By marrying this princess for himself. So when it came that a son of David had appeared, and was actually already his captive princess's secret lover, who had been sneaking around with her since they were in their early 20s. He was kind of pissed. But by this time, the fate of Rome was all but sealed militarily. And the world that would have been inherited had all but completely surrounded itself and immersed itself into the path of eventual destruction. And there came a false conversion. Two, in fact. One called the Catholic Church, and one called Byzantium. And when the Horde came, they had sacked all of the areas that contained ancient wisdom and turned what was once this faith of the Daughters of Muses and the students of John the Baptist and they formed a religion called Islam. And like Catholicism, like Byzantium, Byzantium, Bzz. It was used, this one of many false religions was used to divide and conquer the world on behalf of those who would take no part in such things other than that which suited them. And they were the Horde. And now, if you combine the expansion of Islamic Caliphate with the expansion of the Horde as a whole, you get quite a large area. And what happened is there was a church in the south that was established by the direct descendants of Christ. That was the first to be wiped off of the face of the earth. And that was the beginning of modern disremembrance. The beginning of the cover-up of history itself. Because in Alexandria was the past, was history, was knowledge, was everything that remained from Thrace, completely rebuilt by John the Baptist himself, and named sort of ridiculously as Alexandria, though there was a more ancient name for it for sure. Something like Shiomata. Anyways. So, all of this whole area, these whole areas completely become removed from contact until the so-called colonial times, in which business deals were struck with indigenous peoples to allow them to be free from the Horde. And if you don't understand, of course, how the Horde could possibly play into it, the Horde's an old ancient thing that doesn't exist anymore, or something like that, right? In this area that they had conquered, surviving the Crusades was known as the Golden Horde. And the only time this culture ever really lost control of the peninsula known as Crimea was during a inter-clan civil war, sort of, war between groups of people in the Khanates, between Tartars and, well, essentially mixed race, Janissary, Kazakh, kind of, I don't know even how to describe them. When the Tartars invaded.
It's just such a weird name. I always think of fish, tartars. Tartars.
And even then, it's such a backwards given name. It's just weird because I mean, Tatars invaded Tartarus. You know, it's just weird. So, anyways. This is the connection between modern times and colonialism. This is what colonialism sought to break through. This is the reason why there was no more Silk Road or anything like that. There was the Golden Horde and the Seleucid, and eventually be known as the Ottoman Empire. And, none shall pass. Yeah, whatever, that's fine. There we go. That kind of lines up almost. No, not really. Alright. So this Western Front isn't even the end of it. Of course, you have the conquest of Spain. And, geez, where's my freaking map for that? Nope, wrong folder. Where is it? Oh, I know where it is. Okay. One second. So here you have the map of the Crusades and the Islamic conquests, not to be confused with the Horde conquests, which, for some reason, you're not allowed to get YouTube views if you talk about the Horde. You know, if you're persecuting a religion and blaming it all on the religion itself, you get lots of YouTube views. You get to help cause Trumpism, in fact. But if you try to give the full truth about the situation and talk about the Horde and how this was basically a two-pronged effort at the destruction of Europe, well, censored, suppressed, disabled, disallowed. Dingo don't care, huh? But just consider. Spain, Thrace, Kievan Rus, and this isn't even the extent of the European conquest, because that's shown over here, even further. why he just stopped the green line when it got to Russia, I guess he has some answering for. But you can see that what you've been told is bullshit. I don't need anybody to agree with whatever I say, everything I say, to know that what they've been told is bullshit, and to be able to see the truth in this for themselves. Because you don't even need to recognize the spiritual side of it, or even the feminist side of it, the feminine, oppressive, chauvinist side of it, yeah. It becomes plain to see that for some reason, throughout history, throughout biblical times, and throughout biblical context, from the time of the Judges, the time of Ezekiel, all the way to the time of Jesus, the time of the Crusades, our enemy has come from the land that the sons of Cain settled after the time of Noah. Period. And there it is right there. And it hasn't gone anywhere. We're a threat to them? What are we going to do to that? Get lost there? We could have every man and able-bodied woman in this entire country enlisted in our military, and we would not make a fucking dent. Okay? This is the Horde. They've been doing this for many, 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 many times longer than our country has even existed. And you think what we know is correct? How arrogant, how naive, how foolish, how blind can you be? Now, forgive me in my arrogance. But it seems as though this manner of speaking, in which the blind are now able to see, even though this is a callous way of looking at it, the sight that is being restored is a lot more important than the medical sight of an individual here and there. Opening the eyes of the blind so they can see, what do they see? They see the truth. And what is the truth? The truth is the knowledge that can set you free and preserve you. If you believe in what? The truth. Oh, it's like Christianity is just reality? Yeah, pretty much. And that which has attempted to usurp and destroy and corrupt with Christianity from within has been the enemy of civilization for as long as humans have attempted to be civilized. Ever since the very real and traceable post-flood settlement, the sons of Cain, who are documented, have also made it aboard the ark and did not settle with the sons of Noah, have been acting as expected, as per their character, as illustrated in the Bible, from that land ever since. Now, if anybody has any questions of the people remaining at the broadcast, feel free to ask them now. Otherwise, we are going to call it a stream. Neville is off to work. Sean likes a good tangent thought. Oh yeah, so do I. Anybody else got any questions? Want anything further discussed? Anything I felt like I skipped off on when I started to get into it? Anything at all? What color are my underwear? Attitude black, baby.
I was getting ready to say I was going to say black. We match.
Oh. The entire reason why we're listening to that audio recording is because they don't think it could be figured out in any, provable way. Other than that, I wonder why they're mentioning Charleston in a way that sounds like there's some sort of illegal transaction about to take place there. So unless there was just some campaign event that would be obviously what they were talking about for that day, I'd want to know what it is they were mentioning as far as Charleston goes, because usually, in a meeting like that where you're discussing things, you're, going to discuss them, not just mention them in passing and be like, yeah, the Charleston thing. So no telling. But that's probably the thing that's worth looking into, as opposed to the shit that they're trying to keep our attention on. But like I said, it could just be a fucking campaign rally that was so obvious that it wasn't worth talking about. I would just think that maybe there would have been a couple of details about a campaign rally, like who he'd have met there, who was going to be there with him, that kind of thing. Just saying, gonna do a thing in that place, sounds like he's buying weed or something, Sounds like he's up to something that he don't want to be too specific about. That's all I'm saying. Anyways, yeah, they've got plenty of shadow corps to move money, that's for sure. I can't believe fucking Republicans and Fox News people can actually say the shit they're saying with a straight face. He's talking about cash instead of a check to silence a porn star that he had an affair. Oh! And then they say, he did nothing wrong. Oh, with a straight face they say, oh, he did nothing wrong. Because he wanted to pay with a check instead of cash to illegally fucking finance something that is just wrong in every way. Oh man. He did nothing wrong while he was fucking this Playboy model while his wife was pregnant with his child. And seemingly wasn't just fucking her, like held her in high regard, and there's
made her spank him with a Forbes magazine that has.
No, that's Stormy. I'm talking about the Dougal. Talking about Doogie Schnauzer.
Karen Dougal.
Yeah. Oh. It's pretty fucking fascinating, though. The Republicans will just completely be unaware of their own hypocrisies. That there's, this time predicted in the Bible in which there will be people who think they were faithful, but they will be led by the defiler into just absolute hypocrisy. And I don't think there's ever been a time in history where people were so fucking full of shit. I mean, just so full of shit. I've never, ever seen anything like this. I've been around a long time. For them to sit there and just act like having an affair is okay, and sit there and take it up the ass with these tariffs, and make these shitty concessions to fucking dictators. And let me just say something about this whole Trump being tough on Russia thing. Let's get down to the gist of it here. Out of one mouth, they say Obama didn't act, but it was basically Mitch McConnell who refused to make a bipartisan statement about Russia's interference. And Obama was doing, everything he could with his tied lame duck wings. But out of the other side of their mouth, they talk about the sanctions. The sanctions. Oh, these tough sanctions. And nobody calls them on that right away and says, well, first of all, it took a lot of pressure in a very long time, and even past the deadline you were supposed to have implemented those sanctions, before you finally got around to implementing those or any fucking sanctions. And it's pretty obvious to me, and I hope people out there just aren't a bunch of fucking naive schoolgirls like Pompeo, that they think somehow that everything is just as they say it was. How long do you think it would take for these Russian oligarchs who were sanctioned, eventually, a year fucking later? Okay. How long do you think it would have taken those oligarchs to move their money around, to do something to, counteract the effect of it? Alright, well that's all for now, y'all. Thanks for watching. Click the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Peace.